Uh-huh. So let me back up a little bit and help people kind of catch up to some of the topics that you're addressing, Jeff. Bob, you had mentioned not too long ago that one of the objectives with metabolic efficiency is training the body to burn more fat so you can preserve your stored glycogen. Why is it important to preserve that glycogen, and what happens if you run out of glycogen?
Yeah, it's a great question. So most individuals have about 2 to 3 hours worth of moderate intensity exercise as to fuel them, or they have enough stores of carbohydrate to fuel 2 to 3 hours of moderate intense exercise. After that, your body's, I mean, it's going to hit the infamous wall or bonking, right? So it's better that we preserve our glycogen stores to prolong that. Now we typically, if we go for 3 to 4, 5, 6+ hours, we try to feed ourselves sugars to kind of maintain that rate of glycogen burning versus glycogen consumption. Very, very important that we tap into those fat stores, simply because you can run approximately 10 Ironmans back to back on the amount of fat stores that you have, and versus 2 to 3 hours worth of activity on your carbohydrate stores. So obviously what we're trying to do is we're not trying to play one nutrient against the other. We're trying to maximize what we already have in our body. We're trying to maximize the ability to use that and preserve the other one so we don't bonk, we don't hit that infamous wall.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. And so hitting the wall, that's sort of the experience that marathoners get, the infamous wall at mile 22, right?
Exactly, absolutely, yep. And you can calculate the time. When does that happen? Between 2 to 3 hours for most people.
Because that's when the stored glycogen is used up.
Exactly.
So now we're talking about trying to do, even an Olympic distance event, let alone a half Ironman or a full Ironman, which is going to take 6, 7, 11, 15 hours for people. So it's a completely different ballgame as far as nutrition and metabolism.
Absolutely.
So there's an interesting medical condition that triathletes can and actually have learned a lot from. And I think this is really interesting when there are genetic diseases. It gives us an opportunity as physicians and also as coaches and athletes to learn something and make changes on our own by observing what happens in certain disease states. So there's a genetic condition called glycogen storage disease, and there's a couple different variations of it. But in these individuals who have glycogen storage disease, they're unable to actually store glycogen. So we just had this talk about, glycogen can be stored for 2 or 3 hours, and the body burns low levels of glycogen at rest, and then we're refueling with more carbohydrates in any form. So these individuals that have this disease have a real significant health issue with low blood sugar, and when your blood sugar drops, your body organs can't function, your brain can't function. Varun, you have some personal knowledge about Noah, who's a child that has glycogen storage disease. Just tell us his story.
Yeah, well, first of all, just a big thanks to everyone for having me on here. Honored to be with nutrition minds like yourself, like Bob and Jeff and Anne Marie. Appreciate you guys sharing all your experience. So Susanna, you kind of gave the background and the context of glycogen storage disease, and this is something, a condition that our founder's son, actually his name's Jonah. He's a young kid, and he had this condition. So it was very stressful for the family, as you can imagine. There's actually a fascinating documentary on YouTube called Life by the Clock, where they detail several families, and basically what's happening is their parents were every 2 hours around the clock forced to feed their kids just regular cornstarch, because as you had mentioned, with the characteristics of this condition, cornstarch was a carbohydrate that would burn at a slow enough rate where it wouldn't overwhelm their system, because they were unable to convert typical carbohydrates, just to simplify things, typical carbohydrates into glucose to give them energy. So in the 70s and 80s, these kids were dying at infancy. In the 90s, found that feeding them this cornstarch roughly every 2 hours, day and night, would keep their blood sugar stable for a long enough period of time, where they could at least function for a couple hours, but then they need to go through the cycle again. So Jonah's family, they were really proactive. In early 2000, they set up a foundation, Pure GSD, to raise money, because this disease, when I say it's rare, it only affects 3,000 kids in the U.S. So there wasn't a lot of research and a lot of knowledge of this condition. Jonah's parents were essentially looking for what they called the world's best carbohydrate, and in the context of the disease, the world's best carbohydrate would be something that would burn very slowly, would keep blood sugar stable for a very long period of time. And essentially what they were trying to accomplish was, let's at least find something we can feed our child at night so he can get 8 hours of sleep through the night. And, as a family, we can have at least that peaceful period of time. So, the top carbohydrate researchers in the world, they ended up looking at rices, tapiocas, barley, wheat, and basically exhausted every carb source out there. And what they eventually found was, with the starting ingredient of non-GMO cornstarch, they put it through a very specific heat and moisture process, 40-hour process where they just cook it with heat and water, no chemicals, no enzymes, and this would actually change the molecular structure of the carbohydrate, so the enzymes would attack a lot slower, and the carb would break down slowly over time. And if Jonah is to take 75 to 90 gram dose of it before he slept at night, this would keep his blood sugar stable throughout the night so he could sleep at night. So that was kind of where, with UCAN, that was kind of where UCAN was born. And Jeff talked about being one of the biggest skeptics out there. Actually, we had no idea that this was even good for sports. And one of the first guys we contacted was Bob, who like Jeff was very skeptical. So I think it's always good to contact the skeptics. You don't want to contact people that are going to tell you, yeah, whatever you say is good. So that's kind of the backstory to UCAN, and I can let others kind of share in the context of the discussion their experiences with it. But the fundamental idea of this carbohydrate is that it stabilizes blood sugar. So at the time, we didn't really have much of a knowledge of metabolic efficiency or understand all the dilemmas that Anne-Marie's detailed so well about the sugar spikes and the different issues the athletes go through. We had no idea. That was really something that people like Bob and Jeff and others over the years have really tipped us off to. So that's really the origins of UCAN, and the idea is that it's a carbohydrate that behaves very differently than other carbohydrates because it's keeping blood sugar stable for a long period of time.
That's a fantastic story. I had never heard the information about Jonah in that much detail before, and it's really fascinating to me. I mean, obviously I'm a physician, so I really enjoy hearing these types of stories, but the real life application of it, just so the family could get 8 hours of sleep, that's fantastic.